Cinthya Ippoliti is our keynote speaker today. And Cinthya Ippoliti, and I hope I said that right, Cinthya, I've been practicing, but I don't think I got it. But she is the university librarian and the director of the Aurora Library at the University of Colorado, Denver. And previously, she was the Associate Dean for Research and Learning Services at Oklahoma State University, where she provided administrative leadership for the library's academic liaison program, as well as services for undergraduate and graduate students in community outreach. Her past work includes the head of teaching and learning services at the University of Maryland, where she was in charge of the spaces, services, and programming offered by the Terrapin Learning Commons, in addition to coordinating the library's first-year instruction program. Cinthya has also authored numerous articles and books, and has previously presented on organizational motivation and leader development. So she's exceptionally relevant for our times and what we're looking at for the coming year. I met Cinthya through ALA's Library Leadership and Management Association mentoring program in 2018. And perhaps somebody thought we'd be a really good match because of our names. It's unusual to have two Cynthias in a room at the same time, but it was an extraordinary year, and I have to honestly say that Cynthia's mentoringship has literally changed my life. She's a talented woman, motivated, and exceptionally giving person. And with that being said, she has donated her stipend this morning back to MiALA so we can use it for programming and whatnot this year. So we're very honored to have her joining us here this morning from Colorado. She's 2 hours behind us, so it's quite early for her. And without further ramblings from me, Cinthya, I'll turn the mic over to you. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Sure, and thank you so very much. I'm so thrilled to be able to be here with everyone today. This is the stuff I get excited about. I love talking about leadership. I know it's weird. And all sorts of kind of other things. And I just want to thank again, I want to thank Cinthya, I want to thank MiALA, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join me today. I think all of us, at least I certainly feel like this is, interesting times for all of us. So the things I talk about hopefully will resonate not only for our current situation, but kind of broader, longer term, because I think these are challenges we all deal with on a kind of regular basis. And just to provide a little bit of context, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just to provide a little bit of context before I kind of delve into the content of the presentation. So the Auraria campus is an interesting campus. It is a tri-institutional campus, which means that we have 3 different institutions of higher education co-located in one physical location. It's Community College of Denver, University of Colorado, Denver, and then Metropolitan State University of Denver. So we actually have kind of the range of different types of organizations on campus. It's a total FTE of about 35,000 students at any given time. And our library staff is 50 full-time employees and about anywhere between 35 to 40 student employees. So we are by no means a large organization. We work extremely hard. It's very challenging. One of the things I want to do is, of course, grow our staffing, but not happening anytime soon. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background about kind of some of the things that have inspired me to think more about leadership and kind of how we can approach all of the challenges that we're facing. So with that, I am going to go ahead and delve into this. I also want to say that there will be a time when we can actually discuss together via Google Docs some of the challenges that you want to address, because I want this to be useful for you. I've been in various keynotes where I've sat there and thought, this is great, but what's the point? I love that the keynote is supposed to kind of inspire and, get us excited about what to do, but I'm a very big kind of proponent of taking it back to the practical side. So hopefully, again, kind of what we talk about today will be very useful and can really spark conversation as you move forward throughout your day and with the year for the organization. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and, and let me move this. And I did this in PDF because I just wanted to make sure that everything was going to work appropriately. So I want to kind of propose this concept that I ran across actually quite by accident of this idea of transformational leadership. And of course, we know there are a ton of different leadership frameworks out there. There's change management literature. there's a ton. But what really kind of resonated with me about this idea of transformational leadership, that it's kind of more of a framework, thinking about almost like a process for leadership as opposed to kind of the content. So this idea of transformational leadership was first defined by Jean Bartunek, and it's this idea of transformational change and leadership is where there's really a shift in how an organization behaves, thinks, acts, what are its values, and sort of kind of all the pieces that sort of govern how the organization looks at itself and interacts with itself and then with others. So what does this kind of mean? It means that these changes and these conversations are widespread and they're self-sustaining. They occur in stages and in environments that face systemic disturbances. So this is literally like things are really changing at a core level. And I can say probably fairly confidently that we are at a time when we are facing a systemic disturbance at a wide variety of levels and in a wide variety of settings. These changes and conversations occur in different types of networks, so different networks of influence. And you have different catalysts for change, and you have different types of change agents that are kind of working through the organization and then outside of the organization. And it also is encountering challenges and opportunities that can be leveraged, and some are on purpose, purposeful, some are predictable, some are not. And again, I would argue that what we are dealing with has definitely not been predictable in a wide variety of means and frameworks. And it also revolves around unsettling of current beliefs and values. And I think this is the part that kind of interests me from that organizational perspective, where you're kind of preparing for a reframing that requires this new information and regeneration of how people are thinking about things and different perspectives. While it's happening, individuals may form ideas that are conflicting. They're kind of testing things out, feeling how things are going and kind of what's going on. And then they sort of emerge with a new understanding and a new framework. And conflicts, of course, may surface, and there might be some perspectives that are kind of favored over others. And then this new framework, whatever that looks like, is chosen and applied either mentally or behaviorally or both. So these are the kinds of sort of tensions and challenges and issues that are going on kind of underneath everything. And I think the more we can be purposeful about bringing this to the forefront, the more it can help us prepare to have those kinds of conversations that actually lead to the change in the organization and help us figure out what do we do, how do we get there, what do we want the organization to look like and feel like. So let me just make sure I didn't skip too much. No, I did not. Okay. So transformational leadership in this context of transformational change really provides a sense of vision and pride and trust in the work. And so it's about, again, figuring out who are we, how do we get there, what do we want to do as an organization. It focuses on treating each person as an individual and thinking about that person fitting within the organization and through coaching and problem solving and, again, working together. And it really occurs when leaders do a couple of different things. When they elevate the interests of their members above their own, when they generate excitement around this vision and this mission of the organization, and when they support participants to look at their work as contributing, again, to the benefit of the whole group rather than a specific individual. Of course, the individual may benefit from the opportunities that are offered and those kinds of things, but it's really about kind of bringing everyone together to really be thinking about the organization as a whole and about their roles within the organization. And it's all really underscored by this idea, and it's skipping around, I apologize for that. It's really centering on this idea of inclusive leadership. It's kind of underscored by inclusive leadership as the linchpin to all of these other elements. And what we're going to spend the next few minutes looking at is talking a little bit about what does transformational leadership look like in practice, and what does inclusive leadership look like in practice. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how does all of this fit in with our current kind of state of challenges related to COVID and the many other social issues that are occurring nationally and internationally at the moment. So that's kind of what we'll talk a little bit about next. Let's see if I can get this to go without skipping. Okay. So transformational leadership in practice has different elements associated with it. And the first one is competency-based elements. So these are the ones that focus on what are individuals and organizational knowledge, experience, and skills. So this is both at the leadership or administrative level, so in this case, your board, and also the membership. So what does each individual bring? What does the organization have in terms of experience and skills, and what does it offer? The collective elements kind of focus on how authority and responsibility are distributed within the organization. So how are decisions made, who holds what role, and again, being very open and transparent about how all of this happens. And I'll give you some examples in just a little bit. Collaboration is the thing that we all, obviously, we have to work together. And it's everything we do. So it's thinking about team dynamics, conflict resolution, how relationships function. And again, think about this idea of kind of these networks of influence and how do they informally work within the organization? So how do folks interact with each other? And then external to the organization, how do you interact with other organizations or with other entities and individuals? And what does that look like? And then compassion, which I think is huge, again, especially in this context, which takes into account the social and emotional well-being of the organization and the individual. So again, treating people as individuals, realizing that we are all humans, that we are all having the same problems and the same challenges, to be flexible, to think about team building, recognition, and supporting each other through not just tough times, but throughout everything that we do. So this is kind of, so again, thinking about transformational change, this broad, big ecosystem kind of approach, thinking about transformational leadership, which sets the tone for how the organization is defining how it wants to move forward, how it wants to function and work together, and then thinking about these different kind of facets of how transformational leadership actually happens in practice and all the different pieces kind of associated with that. So moving on to inclusive leadership. And by the way, I have resources linked at the end of this presentation, and I've shared the link with Cinthya, and so hopefully don't feel like you have to jot down everything, because I did provide all that information, so you can definitely look at these resources for additional reference later on. So inclusive leadership, to me, again, as I said, is the linchpin of transformational leadership. It's really the thing that holds all of these other pieces together. And it has kind of the following areas. So commitment, of course, to diversity, and making sure that the leaders themselves see this as a personal value, as an organizational value, and that you align these with the organization's objectives and values. It also takes the courage to look at oneself and the organization through these lenses. So understanding where the biases might reside, and again, we'll talk about what that looks like, being self-aware and constantly working towards improving oneself and the organization towards continually working at this. This is not something that any of us can say, well, I've taken a course on, inclusive leadership or something, I'm good, I'm done, we're moving on to the next thing. It has to be at the forefront of everything that the organization thinks about. And I've mentioned this again, cognizance of bias, both in self and others, and making sure that we're constantly learning and thinking about how we're practicing the frameworks of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we're integrating them into everything that we do. Curiosity to learn from others and to explore. So again, having an open mindset, a desire to understand how others view and experience the world, and tolerance for ambiguity, for failure, and trying again, and saying it's never enough, we're not going to stop, this is something we will always continue to learn about and think about. And this one, cultural intelligence, again, making sure that everyone understands where individuals are coming from, what they bring to the table, treating everyone as an individual, and really thinking about how to make, again, purposeful decisions that have inclusive leadership at the forefront. Finally, it's echoing again, collaboration, making sure that there are different perspectives in the room, that different voices are heard, bringing those voices that perhaps might not have been heard in the past or previously to the forefront, and making sure that when these decisions are made, there's as wide a perspective represented as possible. So what does all of this mean? I've kind of, again, ran through this stuff fairly quickly, but these are kind of all the different pieces that I've been doing a lot of thinking about, and how they all fit together within my own organization, and how I as a leader can kind of help foster some of these things and help move some of these things forward. Let's see if I can get this going here. Okay, so inclusive leadership in practice. And these are some of the things that I've actually started to do within our library, and some things we're still definitely very much working on. So treat diversity and inclusion as an organizational priority. So what we've done is we are integrating equity, diversity, and inclusion as part of our strategic planning efforts at my library. We also created a list of EDI action items that we said, this is something that we have to work on like right now. We can't wait anymore. There are definitely things that are going to be longer term, kind of broader picture, but we need to make absolutely sure that that these things are getting done, and that strategic planning is not viewed, EDI as part of strategic planning is not viewed as an add-on, but it's just part of all the services and everything that we do, and it's continually part of us as a learning organization. So training, how do we approach services, constantly asking if you're providing a service in a certain way, who is being excluded or what's not really being taken care of within that particular service. Allocating resources towards improving diversity and inclusion. So again, for us in our library, that means collections and training, and making sure that if we are supporting an initiative that we allocate funding towards it. It's, you know, you kind of, things that you pay attention to and support are the things that the organization is, whether intentionally or unintentionally, signaling this is what we care about. And if you don't support those things, or don't talk about them, or don't provide funding for them, you're sending that message just as loudly as if you kind of said it, you know, more directly. Making fair decisions about how promotions happen, or rewards, or task allocations. So again, how, for example, and I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth a little bit between kind of a library setting and an organizational setting, but for example, how are committee appointments made? How is committee membership? Is there a diversity within those? Are appointments made fairly, or is it a pretty subjective process where somebody just picks and chooses who should be on what committee? Is there a better way to do that? What does that look like? And I know, for example, ACRL has been grappling quite a bit with that as well. Making sure that you have transparent and consistent decision-making processes. So what this means is that all the meeting minutes are up where they can be easily viewed and shared across the organization, that there is a very clear way that decisions are made and announced. So it's talking about these things up front, that there's clear roles. So how are you making a decision? Is it a consensus decision where everyone has to agree on something? Or it's okay if a few people don't agree, but the majority agree, so that's what you go with? Or is it more of a voting where people vote on a particular issue and that's how it's decided? Whatever method you employ, make sure that everybody knows about that method and how it manifests itself within how the organization kind of functions. And then, of course, assemble teams that are diverse in thinking. And I like to think of this too as a stakeholder engagement framework. So not only having a wide variety of perspectives and voices within each group, but being, again, purposeful about how does the organization engage with its members? What is the membership roles within the organization? Is it more of a consulting role, where you ask for feedback and integrate that feedback into whatever decisions are being made? Are they actually in a collaborative role where they have sort of an equal voice or a say in whatever decision is being made or program being offered or initiative happening? And again, it gets back at this kind of network of influence, and how do these relationships work together, and how do you see members kind of fitting within all of this? And then creating a safe environment where people feel comfortable to speak up. And this concept of interaction safety, where, you know, everybody is kind of, and it ranges, and you'll see in the reading, it ranges from nobody feels safe. It's a very unwelcoming environment. If there are issues, no one wants to talk about them, all the way to the other side of the spectrum where it's a very welcoming environment. Everybody is comfortable speaking up or pointing out if there's something that's not working well or going well. And then there's kind of areas in between where where maybe perhaps in this example, maybe some committees are really great and they're working well and feel comfortable, but maybe other areas of the organization are not doing so well. And so again, making sure that you are creating an environment where everyone feels comfortable to point things out and to have honest and open conversations about whatever is going on and addressing those issues head on. Because I think a lot of times we sort of make assumptions like, well, I welcome everyone to tell me what's going on, but in practice, that doesn't always kind of translate. So making sure that you are aware of that. And then what does this look like kind of at the individual level? Again, demonstrating the ability to try to see things from others' perspective and to recognize and honor other viewpoints, actively seeking those perspectives and bringing those voices into the decision-making process as much as possible. Acknowledging personal limitations and weaknesses, and we'll talk about this during the next kind of couple slides, but I've done a lot of that lately. So we've had, things have been very chaotic, very crazy. Some things definitely have gone better than others within even my own organization. And I try really hard when I'm responsible for something that did not go well to actually own it and acknowledge it and say, you know what, that did not go well. I learned something from it, and this is what we're going to do next time to make this better. And I've done that in front of all library meetings, and I've done that also post decision making, that we've done. And then we're like, oh, oops, that was probably not the best approach or something like that. So I've tried to do that with individuals, and I've certainly done that in a group setting as well. And it was not easy. It's taken a lot of courage, but it was actually very well received. And I was surprised at how people were very open to that and actually thanked me after I've done some of these kind of sort of public acknowledgments of when things could have gone better, just very, very warmly and welcoming. And that made me feel like, okay, this was definitely the right move. Because again, I think there's a lot of tendency to blame, and especially when things don't go well. And I think, yes, there's of course, perhaps a place for that, but I think it's more important that we own some of these things as well. And then again, seek information on kind of the local context, sort of what's going on around you within the state and perhaps nationally. And then empower team members to make decisions about the issues that impact their work. And I know the word empower is also fraught with issues, and I don't mean to say that the organization, sort of gives permission to people to sort of have this, but really think of them as partners in the decision-making process. And this has to do, again, also with organizational development. And so how do you, again, making these things very purposeful, how do you include people in these decisions, in these initiatives in a way that allows them to have that buy-in and to have that say about what's really going on with the organization? So what does all of this look like in a crisis, as we are, again, faced with at the moment? So I think a few things. This work becomes even harder in a virtual setting. I think it's 10 times harder to have a meeting. I know we've all experienced Zoom fatigue. It's just harder. It just makes it that much more difficult. So you have to pay even more attention to all of these things. You have to be gracious and kind to yourself and to others. And I've said that I try to say that as often as I can within my own organization. We have to support each other and also talk about what that means. I think, again, we say a lot of these things very generally, but we don't really talk about, well, what does that mean when I say we should support each other? What does that look like? And think about people first. As I said, we're all humans. We're all dealing with the same stresses. Many of us, have different personal situations. You don't often know what somebody's going through. And making an assumption that, they're not doing this or that because they don't want to is not necessarily the best approach. And again, failure and vulnerability will be present. They are present. They're present not just now, but they've always been present. And I think the more we can talk about that and bring it out into the open and acknowledge it, I think the better for the organization. And then again, treating people with fairness and with respect. Make sure the processes and policies that you're putting in place are equitable and are as consistently applied as possible. I realize it doesn't always happen, and there might be exceptions or things that come up that inevitably change that, but being very mindful of that is really important. And then value and belonging. So people are part of a membership. Why, what does that really mean? How do we make them feel welcome and that they belong within the organization and that they have a role to play in the success of the organization? So again, fostering team building and that psychological safety to be able to say, hey, this isn't working or that's not working, and how do we all work together? And confidence and inspiration. So again, space to voice concerns and work through the issues and really be very present and very active in the work of the organization, whatever that may mean and look like. And then thinking about new ways of collaborating and workflows. Is there some process or some initiative or something that can come up that you may have not thought before about, but maybe now is the right time to try it? So just do it, try it, see what happens, and kind of learn from it and talk about it. And then have flexible guidelines and processes. Again, thinking about how does this look like? How can this work better? How can we make this as easy as possible? And different adaptation timelines and cycles. So again, not everything is gonna be timed the way you might think it does or work exactly the way it is. And so again, having that flexibility and having a communication plan is key. One of the things that I've discovered throughout this situation, I think more than ever, is how badly communication, again, we make assumptions. Well, I sent an email, clearly people must have read it, right? Or why didn't they understand that this is what I meant and not that? Or, we had a meeting and I left feeling like nobody really understood what we were trying to do. So having a plan and writing that down and talking about it with membership and with everybody to say, this is how we plan to communicate, what's missing, would this work? Thinking about all the different formats with which you communicate. Is that really the best approach? And different things will require different communication styles. Obviously, if something's changing drastically with the membership, that needs to be handled very differently than if you're just offering a new webinar on something. So, and I think we've seen recent examples of this at the national level with our own organizations, and how things were handled and all the different perspectives and opinions about how, some of the messaging might have been handled differently. So thinking about that very, very purposefully. And again, letting people know this is how we plan to communicate. Is this going to work for us? So because I promised, and we've got about 10 more minutes, and because I promised we would make this interactive and practical for everyone, what I'd like to do, and I'm going to put the Google Doc, I have a Google Doc, trying to keep it as simple as possible. I got really fancy at first. I was like, I don't need to get fancy. This is about the content. I'd like to kind of have all of us talk through what you see are some of the biggest challenges for MiALA that you see going forward. And so what I'd like to do is bring up the poll so you can vote on what you think are your biggest challenge areas. And if there's two, we can kind of quickly go through both of them. If there's just the one, let's focus on the one. And once we vote on that, then we'll go to the Google Doc, and then we will add information for each of these three sections. what's currently working related to that particular area of transformational and inclusive leadership. What are your biggest challenges, and what do you see as some potential opportunities and solutions that you can then think about further, and how you want to approach them? So that's what we're going to do. So let me see if I can go ahead and then we'll have a few minutes for questions at the very end. So let me see if I can bring up the poll, and I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. So hopefully everybody sees the poll. And basically the question is, which of the following areas do you want to concentrate on as it relates to transformational leadership? Competency-based issues, collective elements, collaboration, compassion, and inclusive leadership and inclusiveness. So go ahead and vote. I'm already seeing a pretty clear trend. I'm going to give everybody another 30 seconds or so. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling because there was a clear trend. So the top one was inclusiveness and inclusive leadership, which is fantastic. And that was 19 out of 25 people. So I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. And I am going to, here, I'll just share the results in case folks are interested. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Google Doc, and then I will add the Google Doc link as well in the chat. Hopefully the short URL works. If not, I've got the full URL. Let me pull up the chat. There we go. So why doesn't, hopefully everyone can join me in the Google Doc. So there's the URL. So if you want to go ahead and join me there, we'll see how this works. We're doing this in real time. Is it working for folks? Are folks able to pull this up? Let's see. Oh, access is denied. Uh-oh, let me, asking us to request. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, let's see. I see more folks are in there. Oh, good. Okay, are folks able to get in now? Yes, I see more people in here now. Okay, sorry about that. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead, and we are talking about, and this is the beauty of Google Docs, inclusive leadership. Let's see, I see some more folks in chat. Okay. So the focus of the topic is going to be, we're going to talk about inclusive leadership and inclusiveness. You don't have edit. Okay, yes, now able to get in. Edit access. Okay, let me try this again. See, editor. I thought I had this right the first time, but there goes technology for you. So see if folks can edit. Yes, perfect. Okay, now I'm seeing people able to edit. Sorry about that. Okay, so what is currently working for you? What are some of the things that the organization, or you feel the organization is doing well related to inclusiveness and inclusive leadership? What is working? So go ahead and type in all of your ideas, all of your comments. What are things that are actually being done or it's working? Great. So there's training happening. Many positions are elected rather than appointed. Many opportunities to lead. Great. Entry point isn't too high. Right. And don't worry about formatting. I'm happy to format this and then I'll share that back out with Cinthya as well. So you can have these notes to keep. Great. Many feedback mechanisms. Great. Membership fee is relatively, great. Including different types of institutions. Wonderful. So there seems to be quite a bit already in place in terms of these different elements. It sounds like it's part of decision-making processes. The organization values EDI as a core value. There's different mechanisms in place. Great. Okay. Now, what are some of the challenges that you think MiALA is having or is experiencing related to some of this work? So we've talked kind of about the positives. What might be some of the challenges that you think are there? It's not a diverse field. Yep. Yeah, our field unfortunately is not very diverse, right? So how do you recruit just generally people into the field, into the profession? Don't have closed captions. Yeah. So staff not able to participate as much, different definitions. Yep. And different types of diversity. Absolutely. So how do you think you might be able to address some of these things using some of these, again, some of these ideas that we've talked about this idea of transformational leadership, transformational change? What are some ideas that we can kind of discuss to think about how to build on the strengths and then address some of these challenges? Communication plan. Yep. With closed captions. Absolutely. I think making sure, again, another one would be making sure that there is, that staff are included as much as possible and that they're perhaps, this is where I kind of struggle a little bit. You don't always want to say, well, we're going to have a special track for staff. It's like, how do you include the staff element? I think also having organizational definitions of what you mean by equity, diversity, inclusion. So maybe doing an exercise or thinking through what those means for your organization specifically, I think would be really, really valuable as well. Absolutely. These are really great. Yeah. Staff positions on the board, that might be a fantastic. Yes. About their experiences in regard to EDI. Absolutely. Again, I think there's assumptions. Well, we do some of this so everyone is kind of on the same page. And there's some additional tools that I can also share with Cinthya after the fact. University of Berkeley has a pretty good kind of climate survey. University of Berkeley. UC Berkeley has a good kind of climate survey to talk about where's an organization in relation to EDI. Review of policies, absolutely. again, thinking about how you approach programming, who gets to make the decisions about what kinds of programming are and initiatives are being initiated, call for proposals, who does that leave out? Are there barriers for people to even apply to put in a proposal? I think all of these kinds of things, and the policies especially, absolutely. Always also think about the appointment process again, or the kind of volunteer or election process. Is that marginalizing any groups or preventing some folks from feeling like they even are qualified or can come in to the organization? The recruitment piece, I think, for the profession as a whole, I think that's a huge challenge to tackle. And I wish I had some great answers. I think one of the things we've been doing a lot at our institution is, again, trying to reach out to as many groups, as many individuals as possible. How you write, this is not quite as related, but perhaps even how you write like officer or committee charges, especially with job descriptions. This is where it gets to be really tough, because if you write something like must have 3 to 5 years of experience, a lot of folks don't see themselves in that and they don't even apply. So again, how do you kind of take away all of these barriers to even participating, let alone then being really active in the organization and the profession? Well, this is wonderful. We have a great list of ideas. I promise to save this now that I fixed it. And I will share this back out with Cinthya so that you can take this and kind of start to create your action list based on some of this information. Hopefully this was useful. I know we had a really short time to kind of sit with this and talk about it. Great, I'm glad, John, that you found that useful. And so with that, I don't really have a whole lot else. I did have another slide on kind of reflecting what else sort of you wish, that I would have covered or brought or thought about, that I didn't, but I want to open it up now for questions. Please feel free to unmute and ask your question that way, or chat if that's more useful. And I'm happy to take any questions that you like, but hopefully this kind of provides you with some of the context, some of the framework to kind of help take those conversations to the next step for the organization. So what questions do you have? What can I offer? So how we've been working, so I received a question about including the staff at Auraria. So we try to be, again, very purposeful about it. As with all libraries, unfortunately, there is still a divide between kind of faculty roles and staff roles. So we do try to have wide representation on committees, very mindful of that. Trying to think about, well, if we're doing something, for faculty over here, let's not forget about the staff, making sure that, again, it's a very unified effort, that we provide opportunities for everyone to participate. There's very few places where it's sort of a faculty only kind of a, whatever you want to call it, program or promotion or something like that. So for example, salary equity and some of these other things, that's across the board. So the question from Bethany about how we changed our recruiting interviewing process. So we're in the process of doing this. So we made sure that we subscribe to all the ALA caucus listservs, which I'm ashamed to say we did not used to do. So we've started to do that now. We are trying to be much more proactive in the recruitment. So not just waiting for people to apply, but thinking about who can we reach out to, even if they're not interested themselves, maybe they know somebody else. We write salary information into all of our job descriptions. We have an EDI statement that we also include in the job descriptions. We try to make the job descriptions as, I don't know how to say, like user-friendly as possible. And then we also are looking at our interview process. What are we kind of signaling by having a candidate do all of these things, and approaching it not from a perspective of like, well, how can we set them up so they can kind of go through the gauntlet of the day, but how can we set them up to be successful so that they can do their best, so that we can really get a feel for who they are as a person. And I think the other big piece is this idea of fit, and making sure that you're not saying, well, they're just not going to fit into the organization, and really examining what that looks like and kind of unpacking that. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do. And then on the back end, trying to think about like our onboarding and our employee support processes, so that we can make sure that they're successful, not just up to the point they enter the organization, but afterwards too. Exactly. So Juliana, yes. So I did not really talk about emotional intelligence. Absolutely. It's a necessary component to be a transformational leader. So this idea of emotional intelligence is how it's kind of understanding yourself first and foremost, and how you sort of deal with the emotional kind of pieces, and how you work with people and understand them and deal with conflict. But then it's also taking that out into the whole organization and thinking about how does everybody else do that, and what does that look like kind of when it's more of that organizational level. And it's really understanding how you personally kind of deal with things, and then how do you work with others, and how you kind of tailor those relationships. So thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. Yes. Any other questions? Great. Well, I think that's all the questions that I saw. Again, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to spend this time with me. I hope this was helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, my email is here in the presentation somewhere. There it is at the bottom. Here's my list of resources as well. And if you do think of anything else, please reach out to me. Cinthya has the presentation. I'll also make sure that she has the Google Doc, so that you can kind of refer to it for ideas later on. And again, thank you very much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and much success. So thank you. Great.
Cinthya, thank you so much for joining us